I am really thrilled about this next event. We have until just after 10 o'clock, so we have about 40 minutes with these folks. Particularly thrilled to introduce my friend Steve Benjamin, who is the current mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. You can see all of their incredible biographies in our materials. Just want to highlight a personal note. One of the highlights of my entire time as the mayor of Charlottesville was really just being sort of a parasite on Mayor Benjamin's reputation, because some of the best press that we got was when he came. Amazing local TV hit when Mayor Benjamin came and talked at UVA. He got a wonderful reception. So Steve, if you're ever looking for a second act, Charlottesville, ready to have you. Very thrilled we have this illustrious team of mayors here. Jesse Argan of Berkeley, Andy Burke of Chattanooga, Jorge Elorza of Providence, all national leaders in so many different ways in addition to their localities and their states. And we are, again, their biographies are in your materials, but they have all dealt with extremism and violence and reconciliation in their own ways. And we're really looking forward to having Mayor Benjamin here to lead a conversation about their experiences, their lessons, and their insights. With that, I will turn the floor over to Mayor Benjamin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. Under the covenants of the Mayor's Mutual Admiration Society, of which we're all members, thank you, my friend, for the incredible leadership you've shown, not just in Charlottesville, but certainly across the country and across the world over the last couple of years. Before that, but certainly your voice has been amplified, and we're all the beneficiaries of it. I see Jane Campbell, the former mayor of Cleveland, here with us as well, in a different role here, helping lead this discussion. And excited to be here with my colleagues and each of you here today. Really thankful for the incredible partnership that the ADL has helped establish with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and our colleagues across the country, especially post-Charlottesville, where after that incredibly painful moment in the arc of American history, we quickly mobilized and had 325 mayors sign on to our compact, our joint compact against hate and bigotry and extremism. And we have been working diligently over the last couple of years to concretize that in a way that allows us to continue to be the voices that we believe mayors are supposed to serve in American life. Oftentimes, Washington, D.C. seems to be distant from the everyday lives of our citizens. Sometimes that's actually seeped into state governments. But the mayor is required every single day to engage with citizens, whether we want to or not, at the supermarket, church, synagogue. I get advice from citizens at the traffic lights on what may be happening. But we serve at the center of incredible metropolitan economies that look like a microcosm of the world. In our city of Columbia, we have citizens from the 194 sovereign nations of the world, speak 90 different languages. Our strength is in the fact that we are living, breathing organisms that must always speak up for every corner of our citizenry. And that's something that we're very proud that the Conference of Mayors has been able to do, to lead from the front since 1932. And we're excited about this partnership that we believe is so essential and necessary right now. Not just being aware of the challenges that we're facing with this incredible spike we've seen in anti-Semitic and racist behavior, Islamophobia, all types of xenophobia, oftentimes amplified by the most powerful voice in the land, and that's probably the only reference we'll get to that from me here today. But it's required us to redouble our collective efforts to make sure that we are continuing to build upon this more perfect union that we want to build here in the United States, and realize that there's a great deal of work to do. We have established, just in the past few weeks, we launched in Montgomery, Alabama, a new Mayors and Business Leaders Center for Compassionate and Inclusive Cities. We launched it there in the shadows of the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice that EJI and Bryant Stevenson have helped launch down there. He's been a wonderful partner with ADL over the years, and I will tell you, if you have not had a chance to go to Montgomery, Alabama, and if you never thought you'd go to Montgomery, Alabama, I would encourage you to go to Montgomery, Alabama. It tells a very important part of the journey that this great country has been on for the last 2.5 centuries, and also tells us how much farther we have to go, and the role that each and every one of us has to play in making that, making this country what it's supposed to be. Our Center on Compassionate Inclusive Cities is focused on making these challenges that we're facing a topic of everyday discussion in our cities, not just top of mind awareness, but actually preparing our mayors and our colleagues and business leaders to help deal with these issues every single day. As you might suspect, I came here from Washington, D.C., and right before that in Philadelphia, and we were actually talking about infrastructure, building roads and bridges and water and sewer, and how we pay for those things, how we deal with these opportunity zones, and typically, historically, how you actually protect the social fabric, the heart and soul of your city, how you encourage citizens to treat each other with dignity and respect and understand and appreciate one another, is not something that you would think is a skill set that you have to train for every single day. It's something that our parents have expected of us, and we've been able to teach and regurgitate that. In the world in which we live right now, it requires a serious skill set. It requires the dissemination of best practices. It requires constant education. It requires inclusion in every part of our conferences that we will do from this point forward at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm so excited to be joined by this fantastic panel of mayors. I'm going to briefly introduce them in the interest of time. As Mike said, more detailed biographies are in your programs. But Jesse Arreguín is the mayor of Berkeley, California. He spent his entire life fighting for social and economic justice. He's a son and grandson of farm workers. He attended UC Berkeley, fell in love with the city, and was elected mayor in November 8th, 2016. That was a pretty interesting day in American history. Becoming the very first Latino and youngest person elected to that office in a century. He's made addressing homelessness, affordable housing, improving infrastructure, and educational outcomes his top priorities. Andy Burke is the mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Andy grew up in a Chattanooga family devoted to solving problems for individuals and learned the value of helping others while giving back to and improving his great community. He graduated from Stanford and the University of Chicago Law School and clerked in the Court of Appeals, and was later elected to the Tennessee State Senate. He was first elected mayor in 2013 and made streamlining government and improving quality of life top priorities in Chattanooga. Since then, he's put forth an aggressive workforce development strategy and a number of programs aimed at increasing economic mobility. Jorge Elorza is the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. Recently re-elected, we call him Landslide Elorza. He's the son of Guatemalan immigrants who worked in factories. He attended Harvard Law School, which inspired him to look at the legal system as a way to correct injustices in our communities. He's made year-round education, economic opportunities, one of his top priorities. Mayors, if you wouldn't mind, give us your thoughts on what we can do as mayors and community leaders can do to help reduce racism, hate, and bigotry in our cities and our nation. And I will say this, and I know our mayors know this, I think we really appreciate the work that's being done here, because we're not just talking think tank work, and think tanks do great work, but we're talking about do tank. You know, what are some practical ways in which we can work together to aggressively push back against what we're seeing happen in our community? So I would appreciate as much specificity as you can give in your work. Jesse?
Thank you. Well, I want to thank Mike Signer and the organizers of this conference for the invitation. As we know, Berkeley was the center of 7 different events that occurred last year, in which white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups came into our city. And many of the things that Mike touched upon yesterday were reminiscent of the challenges that Berkeley experienced last year, which we'll touch upon in this conversation. But I think one of the powers of being a mayor is to convene and to bring people together. And I think that's an important role that we need to play in addressing hate and extremism and building community. And in the wake of the Tree of Life shooting, the horrific anti-Semitic incident that occurred several weeks ago, I'm sure many of us were in synagogues. We were in connection with the Jewish community. It's important that we as elected officials show our solidarity and our support of our community in these very difficult times, and that we work to bring community together to have a conversation about hate and extremism and to promote more dialogue and more conversation. And so one of the things that we did in response to the series of events that we had in the city of Berkeley and in the Bay Area is we organized a region-wide Unite Against Hate Week, which we actually just completed several weeks ago. It was November 11th through the 18th, where 20 different cities in the Bay Area organized lectures and events around issues of hate crimes and hate and extremism, and to raise awareness, to talk about different strategies that communities can employ to respond to the rise of extremism, and also to bring our communities together in a conversation around these important issues. So that's one thing we've done in the Bay Area, bring different cities together, government agencies, faith leaders, and other community organizations to come together and have a conversation and to come together to discuss how we can work together to combat hate.
Thank you, Jesse. Andy?
Yeah, so again, thanks for the conversation. Mike and I actually were talking about these issues in the weeks leading up to the Charlottesville rally. I remember having those conversations with him at a breakfast at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And so I was paying close attention that day, having talked about it. I want to say thanks for your leadership to the ADL, and I'm going to talk a little bit. They're helping Chattanooga right now. But I also want to say it's an honor to be up here with these individuals. You know, Steve is just a national leader right now. We admire and follow what he does, and you know, I know that Jorge's work is being looked at nationally, as particularly when it comes to children, and so we appreciate it's an honor to be up here with them. I'll even say good things about Jesse, even though Stanford and Cal play this weekend, and we're trying not to fight up here. So let me just give you a minute about how I kind of came to the conversation. In 2015, July, a young man who had grown up in our city, his dad worked and still works for the city of Chattanooga in our engineering department. He had been radicalized and was under the influence of ISIS and went to 2 different sites in our city, wounded 1 Marine, killed 4 Marines, and killed a sailor. This was an incredibly horrible incident. Unfortunately, mayors now have to deal with mass shootings. This involved the military. And in the moments that followed this, because unfortunately this is something that we think about, what I did was I rolled my whiteboard into the office. I brought in the whole staff, and I put in principles for us to live by. And we kept it up for the next several weeks. And one of them was not one person will be radicalized as a result of this incident. So that was one of the things that we had as a principle. We will make sure that not one person is radicalized, not one young person, because the way that we respond is treating the Muslim American community in our city in a way that causes them to be radicalized. And so one of the things that our police chief and I said at every single event was that that everybody in our city needed to be protected. That was our job. And the Muslim community, fortunately, I'm a Jewish mayor. I had really strong ties in the Muslim community. And we were able to forge a common bond. And at our big vigil, it was an incredible moment that I will get goose pimples up here. You won't be able to tell, but at the vigil for this event, again, this young man, you can imagine, his family is a pillar of this community. And the leader of the community got up on the dais at church and at the pulpit and said, "Tonight is the last night of Ramadan, but the Chattanooga Muslim community, tonight we are not Muslims first, we are Chattanoogans first." And the entire Muslim community of our city stood. It was incredible. So I got involved in this, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more. We started working. I started doing some work initially from Secretary Kerry had begun a Strong City Network to combat violent extremism. I got involved with that, started doing some work around the world, and listening to the stories about what people were dealing with around inspired us to work with the ADL on some national and international things about gathering mayors to talk about hate. And then I thought, well, why, we were doing these one-off events in the city. How can we make this more concerted and thoughtful? And so at the last day of the city, we started a local council against hate, got a whole bunch of people, and have a report that's coming out just in the next couple of weeks, talking about what the council has done so far and what we're about to do. And so this is really critical work. We've seen the terrible toll that hate takes on a city, and it's something that we all have to contend with.
Thank you. Thank you. Jorge?
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to begin by adding my voice to the chorus. There's something poetic about this. It's often said that out of the darkness comes light. And as a result of the horrendous incidents throughout the country, in particular in Charlottesville, Mayor at the time, Mike Signer, really came out of that as a national leader. And we really appreciate your friendship and your work in bringing us all together. I look forward to all of the hard work throughout this session and that's to come. So thank you, Mike. So I came to this work, in all truth, 2 years ago, after the presidential election, and the reality is that there is and there has been a great deal of fear and anxiety in our communities for a very long time, but it's been accentuated over the past couple of years, and of course. We know what that's about. We have a national spokesperson. We have our president, who began his campaign in a very anti-immigrant posture, and that continued. In the city of Providence, we have 30% of our population is foreign-born. 46% of our population is Latino. We have a large community of Africans and Southeast Asians. And so you can imagine that whatever fear and anxiety existed, it was just dialed up at that moment. And so what we did in Providence is we essentially looked at every group that had been either insulted or targeted by then candidate Trump. And what we resolved to do is that for every week between the election and the inauguration, we would roll out a new initiative, a new announcement, or additional resources targeting those specific groups. And some of them were substantive, and admittedly, some of them were simply more. What's the phrase? Symbolic. But what I've come to learn is that those symbolic gestures to the community are just as important and impactful as tangible resources. So, for example, with the immigrant community, I declared that Providence was a sanctuary city, and I defined exactly what that meant for us. We rolled out an ID program so that regardless of who you are, you qualify for a city ID to help undocumented immigrants with a number of daily transactions that become impossible if you don't have an ID. We created a hate crimes hotline to make sure that every single incident was reported so that hate in our community would never be normalized. We created a Muslim American Advisory Board, and we meet regularly in my office. To the LGBTQ community, we adjusted our policy at City Hall to have our health insurance now cover gender-affirming care. We made sure that we had gender-neutral bathrooms in all of our public buildings and in our schools. For families throughout our city, we were the first city in the state to do paid family sick leave. So we wanted folks to feel as though, regardless of what was happening at the national level, while they were in the city, that they could feel as safe as possible, and they could know that the city government had their back. And to this day, one of the coolest things that we did that still sticks with me, right around the time of the refugee ban, or the Muslim ban, we found the first Syrian family that had come to the city of Providence, and we rolled out a 20-foot portrait of the woman, and it's now hanging on the side of one of our tallest buildings downtown. And so, symbolically, the message that sends is one that regardless of who you are, what you look like, you have a place here in our city. And with all of those initiatives, announcements, and the work that we've done in this space, what it's really brought home for me is that as mayors, we talk about filling potholes and balancing budgets, improving education, investing in infrastructure. We need to take advantage of this platform that we have to also talk about kindness and compassion, togetherness and healing and restorative justice. And I think that our communities, we know that any time that there's uncertainty, people are going to fill that uncertainty with their worst fears. And so, while these forces that are dividing us throughout our communities and throughout our society seem to be growing stronger, who is it that's going to be that counterbalance, that countermeasure, to be that force that brings us together? And as mayors, I believe that we sit in a unique position where we can be that force that brings people together. And so, as part of that, what brings me here today, in January, during my upcoming inauguration, I plan to brand our city as a city of kindness. And there are other cities that have done this. There are cities of kindness, cities of compassion. We want to learn from their work. We want to build off of their work, but lean into this much more deeply, and use what time I have in office to really drive home the point that regardless of what I'm talking about in the community, people are going to hear about the need for us to be kind and compassionate to one another. And I believe that that's what folks want to hear and want to see from their leaders today.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, all three of you. One area of always an area of concern is law enforcement and the way in which our first responders, our peace officers, are trained to help deal with these acts of violence or reports of extremism. And I love the work that's being done here in this room. Mayors love to cop good ideas from each other and from other learned individuals. Mayor, you're speaking, and I'm here searching South Carolina statutes to see what I can do about paramilitary groups on the way over with Jonathan. We spent a great deal of time, a very thoughtful chief of police that we have in our city, working to use data to help improve the relationship between our communities of all types, but certainly our communities of color and our police department, using data in that way. But apparently we're lacking in reporting incidents around hate crimes to the FBI. So taking back a lot of different nuggets as to how we might be able to improve the work that we're doing in Columbia, South Carolina. Share with a smaller group at breakfast this morning that yes, those symbolic acts are very important. We became the first city in America to ban bump stocks in our city. We stepped out in the wake of the Charleston massacre and the subsequent Confederate flag debate in South Carolina, when there were rallies upon rallies being planned to take down the Confederate battle flag. I shared that our state government, in its infinite wisdom, state capitol is 5 blocks away from City Hall, decided to award protest permits on the same day at the same time to the Ku Klux Klan of Western North Carolina and the new Black Panther Party of Northern Florida to rally at our state capitol. And we were worried about what that would come, monitoring social media, and we wound up advancing an ordinance that literally banned firearms in the perimeter around our state capitol, the 4 acres that make up that property. You all know the South. You know what the Second Amendment means in the South. We were sued. We won on constitutional grounds and lost on preemption grounds. But it gave us a window within which we could operate that we believe firmly saved lives. And the result, as I shared at breakfast, was the Ku Klux Klan wound up asking our police department to help them get out of town. They needed protection by the time it was all over. But what are you doing with your police departments and these first responders to help them prepare for these types of acts and maybe respond to them when things occur? Some thoughts.
So as I had mentioned, Berkeley was the center of 7 different what we termed as free speech events that occurred on the UC Berkeley campus and in the city of Berkeley. And the first event was actually literally 2 months on the day that I was sworn into office as mayor. And when I ran for mayor, I never imagined that a great deal of my time and energy would be spent responding to violent extremism on the streets of our city. And we know that Berkeley has a long history of social action and protest, but never before have we seen this level of violence and divisiveness occur on the streets of Berkeley. And so on February 1st, which is the first event that occurred, Milo Yiannopoulos, who, as we know, is a right-wing provocateur, was planned to come to the UC Berkeley campus, and there was a large counter-protest organized to try to stop him from speaking at Berkeley. And there was a large group of anarchist protesters who came ready to use force to shut down the protest. And I'm sure many of you may have seen the images on the news. It certainly was widely covered throughout the country of these counter-protesters firing M80s at the police department, using shields to try to ram into the police, destroying property and breaking windows. The march moved off the campus, and if any of you have been to Berkeley, you know that it's a campus in the middle of a city. And so the borders are very porous. And so anytime an event happens on the Berkeley campus, it inevitably has an impact on the city and our commercial districts. And so literally the event spread into the streets of Berkeley, into our downtown, where there was over $600,000 in damage to our local businesses. That was the first event that happened. The second event on March 4th occurred in our park, our Civic Center Park, in the heart of our downtown, adjacent to City Hall, which was actually the focal point of many of these events that happened over the next several months, where we saw something different. We saw a large number of white supremacists and neo-Nazi groups come with flags, with weapons, armed, ready to physically confront counter-protesters. In the wake of the February 1st event, a counter-narrative was put out there sort of suggesting that Berkeley is hostile to free speech. And as the birthplace of the free speech movement, we pride ourselves in respecting the right of all people to engage in First Amendment activity, regardless of the content of their speech. And so this false narrative was put out there that Berkeley is hostile to speech, and conservatives need to come and confront city officials and the police department, the university, and counter-protesters to defend our free speech rights. And so that became the first of many events where we saw organized white supremacist groups come ready to engage in physical provocation, and knowing that people in the Berkeley community, in the East Bay community, would come and would want to challenge their presence in our city. Our police weren't really prepared for how to respond to that. How do we respond to organized militias? I think that is a very correct way of characterizing it, of white supremacists and counter-protesters. It was neo-Nazis and white supremacists and counter-protesters who come with flags with large wooden poles, which were intended to be used as weapons, and all sorts of other makeshift weapons that we could have never envisioned, with the intent to commit violence. How do we deal with separating the groups so that altercations don't happen and violence occurs. These were all things that we weren't prepared, and we had to really draw upon the knowledge that we have heard from other law enforcement agencies and from the FBI and other law enforcement organizations that had experience dealing with extremist groups. And I think we were able to come up with a law enforcement strategy that did facilitate peaceful assembly, but did involve physical separation of groups, setting up perimeters. We passed a special ordinance which enabled our police department to confiscate any object which could be used as a weapon in order to prevent people from coming to our downtown to commit violence. Coordination with the university and all these different police departments was really essential as well. And so I think this conference, I think the conversations that start here are extremely important. Sharing knowledge, sharing strategies, different approaches is extremely important because this is an ongoing challenge that we're all going to face. So how can we be prepared to protect the safety of our community? I think in Berkeley, we learned a lot. We started out with the approach of not really being in the center of the conflict and sort of being on the sidelines. That didn't really work because people got hurt. And so we took a much more direct engagement strategy as these events progressed.
Thank you, Jesse.
So let me just say that I don't know that I have a great deal to add. We've had a couple of events in our city, but I think for various reasons, like Jorge has pointed out, they've just changed in the last year or so, maybe since 2016. They've seemed to have gotten more aggressive. And so most of ours occurred. Our police department is has been very aggressive and good about organizing rallies, but we haven't seen one in the last year, so I don't know. Yeah, I think we'd have to address that. Let me, because I'm a mayor, and when you're asked a question and you don't have much to ask, you just change the question and answer a different question. So what I'm gonna answer to is, I think over the last few years, there have been many questions about how do police interact with our communities and how police interact with marginalized communities, because that's a piece of it too. And empathy is such a huge piece of what our police department is. For those of you who don't work with police officers every day, and I'm way too involved with our police department, but it's hard to be empathetic when you see lots of terrible situations all the time. That's what you walk into, and you have to remember to take a step back and to feel empathy. And so what we have done over the last several years, which I think is just one of the best things that we've done, is that every single cadet who goes through our academy now has to do a report on a marginalized community. And then they have to not only do a report on that, what they do is they do it as groups, and we have several different groups in our academy, and then they report back. So we actually have a community event at the end of every academy where we bring community members in, particularly from marginalized communities, and then our police department presents back what they learned in different groups about the marginalized community that they embedded with. And they usually do a video and talk to people. Anyway, I think that those are the kinds of things that we see right now innovating in cities that are like, how do we continue to find this relationship that we develop between our police department and marginalized communities, so that when these groups come in, also our officers just have a better understanding of what the impact is, why people are so upset about this, not just from a political standpoint, but from a personal one.
Thank you, Andy. And after Jorge answers, we're actually going to step into some Q&A, so have more of a dialogue. So if you have some questions, tee them up, please.
I'll be quick, but I'm going to pull another mayor move. I just heard an incredibly good, creative idea. I've written it down. We have a police academy next year, and guess what they're going to be doing? And so, Mike, I hope you're happy. These sessions, they make a difference almost immediately. And I think Jesse is right on with everything that he said. And we've been fortunate in Providence. We have had some it's a resist Marxism with Antifa clashes, and it has led to some violence. Thankfully, no one has been seriously hurt, but it has taught us in terms of policing strategies what we need to do in those immediate moments. But also, I agree with Andy that there's a lot of work that we can do with our police departments and within our community, because alliances aren't going to be formed in a time of crisis. Sure. It's all of that background work that you've done to establish those relationships and establish the foundation that then you take advantage of, that you then draw from when that moment of crisis does appear. And we do a lot of work, of course, with our police department, but also with our kids in our schools, and teaching restorative justice, going through the healing process, and bringing in police officers to build relationships directly in the schools or after school as coaches, basketball and football. I can't help but believe that all of those almost infinite number of interactions between our community and our police department puts the police department in a much more empathetic and understanding position. But frankly, also helps with gathering intelligence. If those relationships are already there, conversations are being had, they pick on valuable pieces of intelligence that then help us better prepare for these moments when there potentially is crisis and eventually erupts into some kind of crisis. So yes, we need to be ready when that moment appears, but frankly, it's all of the background work that we do leading up to it that will determine how those moments actually go.
Amen. Certainly. Well, thank you all. Love to have a bit of a dialogue, and if you have a question and or a statement or a thought idea to share, if you identify yourself first, so we'll know who's sharing. And yes, ma'am.
I'm conveniently sitting right next to the microphone. Good morning, and thank you all mayors for sharing your remarks this morning. I'm Yusra Ghazi. I work at America Indivisible, where we connect bigotry-impacted communities who are Muslim or appear to be Muslim with their local governments. And one of the questions that I have for you all is, you're all very much at the forefront as mayors who address extremism, hatred, and bigotry in your communities. How do you engage with your peers, so mayors and other folks in municipal government who are not yet there? In what ways are you all internally having conversations to share the promising practices that you've led in other communities across the country?
Certainly. And I'll start quickly. I'll try to keep answers tight. Immediately after the election 2016, as we were preparing for January of 2017, we actually hosted at City Hall Embracing Our Muslim Neighbors event, in which we had people from every faith imaginable share with the folks at breakfast today. We had the Christians and Muslims and Jews, Baha'is, we had Unitarian Universalists. We actually had Wiccans show up. I didn't know we had Wiccans in Columbia, South Carolina, but we did. But a standing room only event in which we read from sacred texts and shared and went across the street and broke bread at a Syrian restaurant in our city. But I think these direct acts, whether it's sanctuary cities or establishing yourselves as welcoming cities to people from across the globe, or people from across the Rio Grande, or those from Central America, every single day, and you'd be surprised in some corners of America where mayors are really leading from the front. Some places we don't anticipate it. Part of the work of the Center on Compassionate and Inclusive Cities is actually putting all of that in one place, one repository, so we can share these best practices with the click of a mouse, and making sure that we have all of this information. But I mean, from places, of course, we get testimonies every single day from Hillsborough, Oregon, or from places in Kentucky or Montana, places that you may not expect to see these acts of kindness and compassion, thoughtful policy making designed to bring people together. It's happening out there, and I think we'll launch our website sometime in the next month or two. Laura, we talk all the time. Laura does all the real work, so we're going to be launching the website very soon, in which we're sharing this information and hopefully, again, using it as an opportunity to share the very best of what's happening across the country. Anyone else, please?
Let me just say one thing, and Mayor Benjamin is doing incredible work. He's the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and so this has been a huge piece of his platform. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Secretary Kerry launched the Strong Cities Network, which is cities around the globe who are trying to take leadership in countering violent extremism all around the globe. And I've had the good fortune to do a lot of work with that over the last few years. And it's important to note this is not just a U.S. issue. This is a problem around the globe. And so, but we're engaging peer-to-peer through that, and we have numerous cities from around the globe coming to Chattanooga talking about what we've done. We've gone other places. I think that there's lots of this work that is going on, and the problem is that, you know, as we push this work around our local cities, there are still giant forces that are out there that are pushing the other way. Mm-hmm. And so we just have to remember that this is imperfect work that we do, but people are trying to lift the veil off some pretty ugly stuff, and it's just important that all of us are engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Another question? Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you for the great conversation. My name is Michael Garcia. I'm with the National Governors Association, and I appreciate the question about how you're engaging police departments, but I think when it comes to this issue, we really need to start thinking about primary and secondary prevention efforts, and eventually tertiary prevention, where police departments will need to be engaged. But my question really is, how are you all engaging your behavioral health practitioners, your mental health practitioners, your social service providers in order to assist those individuals who do feel disenfranchised and then want to go seek out ideologies or a cause in order to feel part of a community and not part of the actual community that you all are trying to so vigorously defend and have people feel a part of? Because I feel like that's the conversation that we need to start shifting to. Yet I know, talking to those type of practitioners who are unfamiliar with this, they kind of get scared because they automatically think of neo-Nazis and the scenes they see from Charlottesville. So anything that you can talk about how you're engaging those practitioners would be very helpful and insightful. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, the lens that we look at this challenge from in my city, as Mayor Benjamin mentioned, every city is its own organism. It's a living, breathing organism, and mayors and leaders in our city, we have to be attuned to it. We look at this through two separate lenses. I do believe that a good part of the division and anger that we have is a real sense that people have that they're being left behind. Mm-hmm. And much of that is economically left behind. 40 years ago, 90% of young people were doing better economically than their parents were by the time they reached middle age. Today, only 50% of young people are doing better than their parents by the time they reach middle age. And so there's a certain level of despair that sets in when you feel as though the American dream is not there for you. And so as a city, we think in terms of a cradle-to-career approach. We want to make sure that all of our young people are on track to reach at least middle class by middle age. So middle quintile by 40 years old, we know all of the developmental milestones that kids need to hit to be on track, and thinking very intentionally at every step of the way so that we're building an infrastructure of support so that kids are on track to success as a matter of course and not as a matter of overcoming all the odds. That's one. The second lens that we use to approach this is with mental health challenges. Many of our kids experience really significant trauma in their neighborhoods and in their communities, and it's impossible for them to absorb and learn in the classroom if they're trying to process why their daddy was beating up their mom last night, or violence that they saw in their neighborhoods. And we know that if you provide these services, let's say in high school, you've waited far too long, and it's too late for many kids. So we've embedded mental health services into our elementary schools. We started off with a pilot program in 6 schools. It was extremely successful. We've now expanded that to about 85% of our schools, and we want to get it to 100% sometime soon. But we know that we have to reach kids early. And kindergarten and first grade is not too early to start. Then the last thing is you have to be explicit about restorative justice. It's extraordinarily basic and simple, just as it is profound. Suspending a child from school and having them miss a week and then come back only sets them further behind. We've told all of our principals, you will suspend less kids. We've seen a dramatic decline, and we're providing additional resources to not only teach the kids, but teach adults restorative justice, taking responsibility for the harm that they've caused, and then having them take specific action steps to restore the community to the place it was before they harmed it.
I just
It's
wanna add
powerful stuff, but effective.
one more thing, which is sort of the counter of what you had talked about. Your question was, what kind of interventions are currently being explored to work with people that may end up, becoming a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist? How can we work to try to engage in conversation and dialogue? I think another thing we need to think about is how we can provide emotional support and mental health support for marginalized communities at this very critical time. We know that our Muslim community, our immigrant communities is facing enormous attacks through policies and through actions. And so I think we as elected officials have an even greater responsibility to provide even more mental health support and emotional support and resources for these communities during this very difficult time.
So we're a little bit over our time, so we're going to take 2 quick questions and give you 2 quick tight answers, and we're going to wrap it up. So
This will actually build on your second point. My name's Ken Bernstein. I'm here as an individual. I'm a school teacher. I'm a blogger. How, as mayors, you may or may not have control that much over what happens in your schools, but you have a community leadership role that can do it. 2 issues. How do we start sensitizing our children, at least by middle school, if not younger, to the issues of diversity that we're facing? And in order to do that, and this is a critical piece, how do we ensure that the school faculty and administrations we already have and those who are coming in are getting the training and sensitivity that is necessary? Because I have seen what can happen with an insensitive teacher or an insensitive administrator culturally to a community as a whole.
Sure. I will tell you, in our city, we do not control the schools, but we engage actively and aggressively with our school superintendents. I work with them every single week on influencing the curriculum, on training teachers, on understanding the role of all communities, from Irish indentured servants to a Jewish history project, talks about Jewish leaders in the 19th century in our city, and obviously the role of African Americans in helping create the city in which we live, and obviously what we aspire to be. So we have a very active partnership with our school district, and but certainly there's so much more to be done. And obviously having 2 school-age girls, I stay actively involved, much to my girls' chagrin in their school lives.
Steve, really quick on this. In Providence, 92% of our kids in our school department are kids of color, and close to 80% of our teachers are not people of color. And we hear directly from our kids that they feel as though they're not connecting at a deep level with adults, and that's a major challenge. And something really interesting. I don't think it's a solution, but it's a sign of the problem. Our students took it upon themselves to do some research on the extent to which we're teaching them about their cultural heritages in our normal curriculum. They took a 300-page history book and counted the number of pages in which historical figures of color were mentioned. 5 pages out of 300 were mentioned inside this book, and so they brought that to our attention. We're now doing something about it, but the fact that that existed and existed for so long, and it was students that had to bring that to our attention, that's a sign of the problem.
Amen. The last word.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Burke Nelson. I'm the senior advisor for the Portland mayor. And unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. But what I wanted to ask you for is, how are you dealing with perception versus reality in regards to law enforcement? And what I mean by that question is, as Mary alluded to, we've had a lot of protests over the last 2 years, and police are very much involved with public safety, and that's their main goal. But the perception within the city of Portland is that when there are protests, police are always out facing against, I guess, Antifa and members of the left, and given the perception that they're protecting the alt-right and patriot prayer, when in fact that's not the reality. So have you ever had that experience, and what can you do to educate me on how to let the public know what the truth is?
Sure, we all have. I'd be happy. You have a great mayor, by the way, in Portland. Be happy to share with you some of the work that we've done in that space as part of our 21st Century Policing Project that started under President Obama. It's continued on. I feel strongly that our city's been a leader in that space. We passed a program called Justice for All back in the December of 2014. That one part of it, and obviously we have training for officers. We actually have pay raises for officers, a new home ownership program encouraging officers to live in the city. But a significant part of the program focuses on the use of data. Senator Booker has a great quote that I've stolen and says, "In God we trust, everyone else give me data." But using data in a way that helps build confidence across communities. Jorge, Andy, one of them may have said that you can't start at the point of an incident in building relationships, particularly with disenfranchised or disaffected communities. That's a process, and we've been able to collect data and to make it clear that every bit of information that we have that's not associated with an ongoing investigation is indeed public information. So every year we put out an internal affairs report that lays out that we had 200,000 contacts with citizens, that there were 7,700 arrests, that there were 300 use of force incidents, that there were these few incidents where deadly force was used. This is the officer, this is the subject, this is the race officer subject. We use data every single day, and we go into the communities and we share that information. So when you walk in, not only is your training with verbal judo and talking incidents down helpful, but the data is very helpful to help people understand that the issues may not be present in your community at the level in which we believe. But it's an ongoing process. I'd love to share some of that information with you. I want to say thank you so much to all of you, the different institutions you represent. I want to say thank you to the ADL, which has for a century aggressively worked to build some really non-traditional partnerships to try and make this country and this world a much better place. Thank you all for your opportunity. Our leader, Mike Signer, the stage is yours. Thank you.